Hi everyone, my name is Belén Michel Torino. I am a grad student at the Master in Computational Analysis and Public Policy. I have a strong interest in games and educational apps. Thus, in this case, we will be reviewing a feature of an educational game. The app that I will review is called Conjugar. It is an iPhone app for learning Spanish verb conjugation. The name Conjugar means conjugate, to conjugate a verb. However, in this case, it is used in a double sense since jugar also means to play. In this video, we will show you how this app makes use of the class GKGameCenterViewController to display achievements and leaderboards while the user plays and learns about conjugation verbs in Spanish. Leaderboards are a great way to encourage the player to challenge themselves and keep track of their progress in the game. And the game kit has a huge degree of flexibility available to create them. In this game, the player wins points when they play the quiz and answer correctly the way a verb should be conjugated for a determined verb tense and person. If you want to quickly show a user interface that displays scores, you can use GKGameCenterViewController class. This is a view controller that shows game center information for the current player, including that player's scores and challenges. To use it, the app first needs to make the view controller conform to the GKGameCenterController delegate protocol. Then, when the app wants to show the view controller, it needs to be created and presented to the player. That's done here. Then, the game needs to implement the GameCenterViewController.didFinish method, which is called when the player decides to close the GameCenterViewController. This is done down here. As you can observe, even if most of the app is written in Swift, this code is written in Objective-C. However, I will show you in a few, when we check the documentation, that the game kit can either be used writing Objective-C or Swift code. Let's go and do that. We can click here and we will have the summary of what this class does. So it says that it's a single user interface used to display achievements and leaderboards supported by Game Center. Moreover, we have here this important message. Your application must authenticate a local player before you can use any Game Center classes. This means that if we want the user to use the Game Center, the first thing we will need to use is to authenticate the player. We won't be able to proceed with any of the leaderboard relevant code if we don't authenticate first. Let's check where is this done in this app. So here we observe that the game kit is imported, a Game Center class is initiated, and we have a Boolean variable name is authenticated, now set to false, and a local player. And the following, here we have a function called authenticate, and here there is an if-else statement. So elf is self local player is authenticated. That validates if the player is authenticated and the game can start using functions from the Game Center. Okay, we did a small parenthesis to mention this important point about authentication. Now, going back to where we were with the class we are analyzing, we will click here, for example, to go to the developer documentation. So here we already talk about the summary and this important message. Now, let's check down here this documentation. As we briefly mentioned before, Here we can see that this class is available in two languages, Swift and Objective-C. We can see that it has been available for a long time, since the iOS 6, also for Mac, for tvOS, and Mac Catalyst. And it is part of the GameKit framework. Just to refresh our memories, in Swift, a framework is one type of module, and a module is a compiled group of code that is distributed together. To display the Game Center screen, we need to initiate a new GKGameCenterViewController object and set its delegate. And its delegate is going to be called when the player dismisses the Game Center user interface. Then we can optionally choose to configure the view controller further to specify which content is initially displayed. This means that we can define the property viewState to which content we set here. In the case of the app Conjugar, we can observe that when the GKGameCenterViewController is initiated, the view set is set to the leaderboards. In configuration, it is also possible to set the leaderboard identifier and the leaderboard time scope. That is a time filter used to restrict which scores are displayed to the player. Finally, up here, we can observe what we previously mentioned. This class belongs to the GameKit framework. If we click here, we can read a bit more about GameKit. And we see how we can add not only leaderboards, but also achievements, matchmaking, challenges, and more. Here we have the topics. Here, for example, the view controllers that we have been talking about, so on. And finally, down here, I wanted to show you this guide that I also found useful. It has some pictures to represent what we can include on a game using GameKit. So, for example, we can include a view to view their scores that they earn, show their achievements like coins or other items that they need to discover. They can be matched with other players, or they can be assigned a turn. Here also we can see another picture, and it's an example of when the Game Center appears in a game, and thus the view controller class appears or interacts with the game. Okay, finally, as we know, all this documentation gives us great detail of what are our options at the time of implementing this class, but it's not very good about giving us actual code examples of how to include this on our game. Thus, I found this tutorial from Gabriel Theodoropoulos, where he's going to show how the leaderboards and achievements can be implemented into a game. Okay, this tutorial, well, it's pretty long, but down here I want to show you where he explains how to display leaderboards and achievements. And he used this GKGameCenterViewController. Okay, so this would be another example, and I think this tutorial is great if you want to implement it in your game. Okay, that's all that I wanted to share with you, so hope you enjoyed exploring the GKGameCenterViewController class with me. Bye!